Hello, how's everybody? Good, 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 good. First, let me just say that I'm grateful to all the folks who've joined me this morning. Our City Council President Jack Young is right here with me, Baltimore City Police Commissioner Kevin Davis, Don Fry, who's President and CEO of the Greater Baltimore Committee, Pastor Dante Hickman of Southern Baptist Church, Pastor Alvin Hathaway, Union Baptist Church, Senator Joan Carter Conway, who is chair of the Senate delegation, Delegate Anderson, who is chair of the House delegation. Also, we have several city council people who've joined us, Councilman Stokes, Councilman Schleifer, and Councilman Pinkett. We have been talking about how we reduce violence in our city, and let me just say that working with the police commissioner over the last few months, not including the 60 days that we spent together along with our city solicitor to focus on getting our consent decree done, which is currently in place, but also looking at the violence that has been occurring in our city. As you well know, violence has been escalating in our city since 2015, and we have a responsibility to reduce that violence. What I should say to you is that in June 2016, the Department of Justice did a review of our homicide unit and made some recommendations in reference to some of the technology needs that we must have in the city. Just a few days ago, you all know that I met with the governor and made a request for some additional resources for the city of Baltimore, including more cooperation with the Parole and Probation Office, because many of you know that at one point we had something like 18 parole and probation officers, 2 in every district in the city, and now we're down to 2. And when you think about the fact that we have so many individuals who are engaged in criminal activity, I think about 86, 87% of the 2017 homicide individuals who were involved in criminal activity had prior records. And many of the victims have been arrested something like 11 times. And a number of individuals who are violating their parole and some are out on parole. So that cooperation is very, very necessary for us to continue to move forward. I also talked with the governor about the need to civilianize at least 100 police officers because we need to get them on the streets of our city. I told you earlier that we had, in January of last year, about 56 individuals who applied to be police officers in Baltimore City. This year we had 157 individuals. We had 111 that we've already hired, but they have to go through the academy. So getting them on the streets is not as quick as people would like to think. So civilianizing those positions is important, which will cost us about $9 million. You know that we recently approved just this past Wednesday at the Board of Estimates another $1.4 million for some technology for our police department. We've been looking across the country, working with the Department of Justice at best practices in terms of the sustained reduction of violence across the country. And we have noted that New York City, Boston, and Los Angeles, California have done a great job in terms of reducing violence in their city. The most sustained reduction in violence has been with Los Angeles, California, with the help of the Department of Justice. And so they have now moved those two, there are 2 individuals who work very closely with cities and police departments to reduce that violence. They're now working in Chicago. The Department of Justice will have those individuals in Baltimore in August working with our police department. So when I sat down with the commissioners, with the governor, I said there's some things that we don't have. You know we have body cameras on our police officers. You know that we have cameras up around the street so you can detect who's shooting what. We have a similar gun spotter, similar to gunshot detection, similar to shot spotter, but it's only in about a 3-mile radius, and we must expand that, which will cost us about another $600 million. We do have smartphones, but we don't have enough license plate readers in our city. We don't have enough technology, the computers that are needed inside of our cars, we don't have that. And I did talk to the governor about laws that we feel, especially as it relates to illegal guns, that need to be changed. While he said that he is concerned that we have enough gun laws on the books, what I said to him is we're concerned about the illegal guns, so he didn't throw that idea out completely. The reason I mentioned those 3 cities is because we will, in our police plan, we're looking specifically at the Los Angeles plan. The focus on specific corridors to drive down crime over a long-term period, focus on 2 specific areas. And you all know that we've already identified transformation zones in our city. So let me talk to you about why we are here. We know that the reduction of crime requires a multifaceted approach. and gun violence has not been curbed in our city. Nearly 90% of the murders this year have been committed using a handgun. Of the 184 victims this year, almost half of them have been arrested for a crime involving a handgun. The handguns used in these crimes are not legally registered as required by Maryland law. In 2016, over 60% of the total years imposed for gun crimes in Baltimore City was suspended by the judiciary. Gun offenders in Baltimore City know, or at least they think, they will not face significant amount of jail time for their offense. And so we believe that it's time for us to put some stronger measures in place, especially as it relates to the possession of illegal guns, and to limit judicial discretion in suspending sentences for those who illegally possess guns in Baltimore City. So what we're putting forth is local legislation. And so in cooperation with the president of the city council and with the commissioner, we are proposing that we will make it a misdemeanor crime punishable by a mandatory sentence of 1 year and a fine of $1,000 for possessing an illegal handgun within the 100 yards of a park, a school, a church, a public building, or another place of public assembly. And let me just say to you all that this is one step, and you know that what we would like to do is make it illegal to carry a handgun in Baltimore City. What we would like to do is, and we would have to do this through state law, is to make it illegal to carry a handgun in Baltimore City, and we would like to make it a felony. But this is what we know we can do locally. And I think that the police commissioner will share with you some examples as to why we should do this. But before we have the police commissioner speak, I'd like to have the president of the city council who will introduce that legislation to speak.
Thank you.
And Mr. President, as you're coming up, I want to be very clear that the mayor does not feel in any way that she can solve crime in this city by herself. Those of you who know and have seen our call to actions, which have involved over 400 citizens across this city, and what I say to the rest of those who think that I can do it by myself, join in the action. We're doing this. Over 400 people have gotten involved, and we're not only asking people in the community to get involved. In our next call to action, we're actually going to knock on doors of individuals, specifically in those areas where crime is at its highest. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for your efforts to reduce crime in the city of Baltimore. We're here today to unveil a piece of legislation that will serve as a tool to help get the most dangerous and violent repeat offenders off of the streets of Baltimore. It's that simple, folks. I know that there's been a lot of discussion both nationally and locally around the mistakes associated with requiring mandatory minimal sentence for low-level drug offenders. We all should be aware of our country's mistake of taking a harsh stance against individuals who suffer from drug addiction. I, for one, have been at the forefront of advocating for an approach that treats our drug problem first as a public health issue. But that's not what this piece of legislation is about. The individuals who are walking around the streets of Baltimore with illegal handguns are not well-intended. They are people on the verge of shattering the hopes and dreams of another family in Baltimore. I've spoken to too many parents, siblings, grandmothers, and friends, even my own family, of homicide victims who are destroyed by the senseless death of their loved ones. And enough is enough. To the people of this city who feel like they have been forgotten and don't see opportunities available to them, I say we are here for you. We're working to provide youth opportunities that will help you join the fabric of our city. But to the individuals who decide to settle petty beefs and local squabbles by pulling the triggers of a gun, you're on notice. If you're caught with an illegal gun, you will do time. We're focused like a laser on continuing our work to provide more employment opportunities, better apprenticeship programs that can provide a steady path to middle class and more affordable housing options for our citizens. That work won't stop and will not be slowed. This piece of legislation is necessary and will help send a signal to the most hardened repeat offenders that it's not okay to take a life and destroy a family forever. And in addition to the mayor's legislation creating a penalty for carrying an illegal handgun, I will be introducing a resolution on Monday's council meeting calling on our General Assembly to pass legislation that will further strengthen penalties for possessing an illegal handgun. And I know for a fact that it'll be a tough road for us in Annapolis, But we're going to push hard. The mayor and I, council members, we're going down to Annapolis and stand behind our city delegation and ask them to push this forward, and we will not stop until we get the law that says 5 years minimal penalty for carrying an illegal gun in the city of Baltimore. The murders have got to stop.
Mr. Commissioner.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. President. For logical and obvious reasons, people overwhelmingly think and assume a few things when it comes to illegally possessing a handgun. Number one, folks assume it's a felony. It is not. Folks assume it's a violent crime to illegally possess a gun. It is not. And many people believe that there are mandatory sentences upon conviction of illegally possessing a gun. There are not. I've spoken to people around Baltimore for the last couple of years who are shocked that the simple illegal possession of a handgun, which is an act of pre-murder in our city, is a misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor offense that more times than not results in less jail time than the jail time that a person gets for having 10 rocks of crack cocaine in his front pocket. Let me make one thing perfectly clear right now. This isn't about mass incarceration or locking up more people. It's about holding the right people accountable and putting the right people in jail. In Baltimore, the right people are those who want to harm you, harm your son, harm your daughter, your friend, and harm our community. There were 318 murders in 2016 in our city. 84% of those murders were committed by someone using a handgun. Of the 185 murders in 2017, 86% of them were committed by someone using a handgun. It's a problem. Baltimore does not have a problem with people who legally possess handguns killing people. We do not. Our problem continues to be those who illegally possess handguns, and when we catch them and when they're successfully prosecuted, they face no consequence for their actions. In fact, 46% of the victims killed in our city beginning in 2016 had been arrested before for gun crimes. 46%. How many of them could have been saved by our criminal justice system? Since January 1st, 2016, there have been 605 convictions in Baltimore City for gun-related crimes. 605 convictions. 60% of those guilty dispositions, either found guilty by a jury or found guilty by a judge, 60% of those guilty dispositions resulted in suspended sentences. It is a problem. Take 21-year-old Ivan Johnson, for instance. Ivan Johnson was arrested and charged on May 20th, 2016 for firearm-related offenses. In July, there was a guilty disposition for the handgun-related offense. Ivan Johnson received a suspended sentence after serving less than 60 days in jail. In September of 2016, the very same year, just 2 months after receiving a suspended sentence, Mr. Johnson and his associates were charged with committing a murder. His story is not as unique as it sounds. The issue of judicial discretion for gun crimes in Baltimore was highlighted also this year by the Curtis Steele case. 2 gun-related arrests, Curtis Steele, 2 gun-related arrests in the month prior to his death, where he possessed his 3rd handgun. Although Mr. Deal had not been to court and convicted of a handgun-related offense, he was only out of jail for 24 hours on his 3rd arrest and 2nd gun-related arrest in a month. You all know this story. There are many more. It is not unique. It's not an anomaly. The state generally preempts local law from regulating gun crimes. There are 3 exceptions to this rule. Number 1, with respect to minors. Number 2, with respect to law enforcement. And number 3, with respect to places of public assembly. This local ordinance makes it a crime to illegally possess a handgun within 100 yards, 300 feet, of a church, a park, a school, a public building, or other places of public assembly. The local ordinance mandates a 1-year non-suspendable jail sentence. That's what needs to happen. We are prevented from making this a felony or imposing more jail time because we have not been expressly granted this power by Maryland's General Assembly. This local ordinance is a creative solution, and the mayor talks about solutions all the time, and people leaning in and providing solutions. This is a creative solution to one of the most serious problems in Baltimore right now. In fact, the most serious. Laws are about controlling behavior, and that is what we hope this will do. This is also a tool to keep violent people out of our society. Our goal is to ensure that the right people, again, are behind bars. And I've been the biggest advocate that's probably ever occupied my office. I don't want to incarcerate mentally ill people. I don't want to incarcerate drug addicts. That hasn't changed. Our goal is to ensure, again, that the right people are behind bars. If you are convicted even one time with illegally possessing a handgun in Baltimore City, within 100 yards of a church, a park, a school, a public building, or other place of public assembly, you are going to jail for 1 year now, no questions. There is also a resolution being introduced soon to call on the General Assembly to do more. This local ordinance that we're introducing is not comprehensive. We would have done more if possible. We need Annapolis to help strengthen state gun laws with respect to Baltimore City, and that needs to happen. The mayor's been leading that effort since she was a senator. Our crime plan and our strategies are holistic. This administration, Mayor Pugh's administration, has recognized that and has put several things in place to help improve our city. This is a legislative step in our continued plan and strategy to keep Baltimore safe and keep those who want to harm our residents or visitors accountable. I am looking forward to support from our city council, and I thank you for your attendance. Mayor.
I didn't know whether any of our state delegation wanted to say a word or two.
Yeah. Thanks, Madam.
Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Kurt Anderson. I'm the chairman of the Baltimore House delegation, and with me today is State Senator Joan Carter Conway, who is the chair of the Senate delegation. One of the things that we are encouraged by is the mayor and the police commissioner's cooperation and coordination of a lot of events that affect not just the immediate violence in Baltimore City, but long-term solutions to the violence. Today's press conference and the bills that are being talked about today certainly address, Mayor, some of the immediate problems that the police commissioner has identified. And I think we have met with you, with the police commissioner, with a coordinating council, with ad hoc groups all across the city. And I am really happy to see that the mayor's crime plan, the police commissioner's crime plan, is at work in so many different ways, with children from as young as 6 years old to middle teens to young adults. There are plans for each of these individuals that the mayor and the police commissioner have worked up and are now have been in place for a while. I was just informed about the LEAD program, the LED program, LEAD program, law enforcement assistant diversion that the police commissioner is doing in Baltimore City. He can tell you about that. But my point is that this is not just a knee-jerk reaction. This is one of many aspects of plans that are being put into effect in Baltimore City to deal with, first, the immediate problem of the violence, getting these horrible offenders off the streets, but also creating an atmosphere where there's police community relationships that are much better and that would allow the police to continue to have great relationships with our young people as they grow older. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
No, the only thing I really need to say, I think Delegate Anderson has kind of capsulized exactly what the problem is. And all we're saying, Madam Mayor, Mr. President, and my colleagues, that we're wholeheartedly supported. I think Kurt will probably carry that bill in the House. And of course, I'll carry the bill in the Senate side. And we'll be adamant about the passage of the legislation that reduces gun violence in Baltimore City. Thank you.
I'm Dante Hickman, pastor of Southern Baptist Church, and we stand united with the mayor and with the city council president, and certainly Commissioner Davis, on this bold first legislative step to quell the violence and to create a sense of public safety in our city. This is long overdue, and certainly we stand with the mayor in this redress of the violence that is happening in our city, and we look forward to continuing to strategize on how we create opportunities in the community for young people as they put down their guns and seek a better way of life and resolving issues.
Thank you.
Morning, I'm Don Fry, President and CEO of the Greater Baltimore Committee, and first I'd like to commend the mayor, city council president, police commissioner for taking this very proactive step in addressing this very challenging problem of facing the city of Baltimore. The statistics that the police commissioner cited are pretty startling, to say the least. We think this is a great first step in taking action to let people know who are carrying illegal guns and causing violence in the city that it will not be tolerated and that you'll be serving time in jail if you do so. We also look forward to supporting this legislation, the city council, and we'll work with members of the state legislature as well as with city council president for the resolutions that they'll be introducing at the city council level to be adopted statewide. So again, thank you very much for your support and your efforts in making this proactive step.
Thank you. I also want to thank my city council people. I didn't know whether they wanted to share a few words since we're all standing here. I knew my councilman would.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Leon Pinkett, Councilman, 7th District. I just want to thank the mayor, Commissioner Davis, Council President for their leadership on this. I think as the commissioner stated, this is about getting legal guns off the street. There's too much violence on the street, especially in the district I represent in West Baltimore. And we need every tool available to get these illegal guns off the street. Bottom line. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, pass.
My name is Al Hathaway. I'm the senior pastor at Union Baptist Church. Communities of our churches should be safe places. They should be places of comfort. They should be places of succor. They should be places where people come and they feel and know that there is love and there's grace. The God we serve is a God of love, grace, and mercy, but he's also a God of justice. And so justice demands that we have effective laws that are focused, effective laws that curb behaviors, and effective laws that ensure that the persons in our community know that particularly in the neighborhood of churches and parks and places of public assembly, you cannot have a gun. You should not have a gun. There's no need to carry a gun. And because of that, we support our mayor, we support our police commissioner, we support our president of city council in this effective ordinance that I believe should be a part of our law locally in Baltimore City.
We're open for questions.
Has your administration done an analysis as to the percentage of actual city space that this bill would apply to? I mean, there are churches and schools all across the city. And can you also give a better description of what a place of public assembly is? Do you have a definition of that?
Well, first of all, we are doing that now. We know that there's almost a church on every corner in the city of Baltimore. As it relates to this legislation, that's a good thing. We have great parks in our city, very wide, and that's a great thing in our city. So what we realize is that we can't do the law that we want to do on the state level, but we can do this law. We've even had the Attorney General say to us that we can do this law. And so we're doing what we can right now. And so when we say public, for us right now, it's what we've already defined here. And we'll look and see if there are any other places of public that we can be inclusive of as well. But I would think that any public is public buildings. As you well know, City Hall is a public building. Schools are public buildings. So wherever these public accommodations are available, at this point, according to the Attorney General, this law can be passed.
Would this also include shopping centers, places of business? I mean, I'll just use Hardwood Place as an example. What would Hardwood Place fall under that definition?
It's a public place.
So it's a place of public assembly. So conceivably, I mean, any business that's open to the public could be considered a public place.
Well, there's some private ones, but certainly.
Are you going to propose, I mean, it's July.
Yes.
And the legislative session starts in January. Your goal is to have a 5-year felony.
Yes.
Minimum mandatory
That is
felony
absolutely
for
right.
illegal gun possession. With the legislators who are here, is that doable? Because my understanding is that would be a Baltimore-centric law.
That's what we want it to be. We want it to
Is
be.
it doable?
I think it's doable, only because it's focused on Baltimore City. It is extremely difficult when we pass a law and impose it on other jurisdictions who feel that they're not having a problem with it. But obviously, Baltimore City is having a problem with the illegal handguns and the violence. And I think we have the ability to drive that point home. I think the governor's reluctance, of course, deals with, gun control. And he doesn't want any more restrictions, but in this instance, this is a much-needed bill in terms of the violence and the illegal possession of the handguns. So the bill will be specifically focused to our jurisdiction, Baltimore City. And you'll have a better time than having a statewide bill, and they fight very hard because many jurisdictions don't want the same types of things that are happening in Baltimore City. But this is going to be specifically focused to Baltimore City.
Yeah, Kurt and I carried this same bill for the last 2 or 3 years as a statewide bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And Ms. Miller, let me just add that current law in the state of Maryland is that it is a mandatory sentence to wear, carry, and transport a handgun, but on a first offense is punishable by only, the mandatory part is only 30 days. It's 30 days up to a year in jail. For a second, it's suspendable, that's correct, Mr. Commissioner. For a second offense, it's mandatory year, up to 10 years in jail, also suspendable. And then for offenses up to that, it's a mandatory 5. All we're doing is moving it up a step in Baltimore City so that the first offense, and adding the term unsuspendable,
Right.
so that if a person is convicted, as the Commissioner said, of wear, carrying, and transporting a handgun under this new state law, the person would have to be subject to a year in jail, mandatory to be given by the judge, and unsuspendable. And then on the second offense is where the 5-year penalty comes in. The 5-year mandatory means without the possibility of parole, unsuspendable. And these things are not that much different than current law. That's why we're encouraged of our ability to do this within only Baltimore City. And we've gotten an opinion from Kathy Rowe, we can put it online for you, that told us that this is constitutional to do in a specific jurisdiction.
And if you were to get the state law that you want, would you rescind this local ordinance?
Well,
No, not necessarily so. The state law, preempts local law anyway.
right, and
Right,
it expands what we're trying to do
exactly.
and covers what we're trying to do.
Right, and, oh, by the way, and Luke Clippinger, who is a delegate from the 46th District, would be the person, I'm sorry, Joan,
No,
who will
he's
be,
okay.
he'll be introducing that bill on behalf of the Baltimore delegation, and we're going to make it emergency legislation as well.
Sure.
Delegate, you know, convincing your colleagues on the Judiciary Committee and Mayor and Senator Conway know this, the colleagues on the judicial proceedings, and convincing them of eliminating judicial discretion on sentences is a tough thing to do because they like judges to, some of the defense attorneys don't like the fact that judges have discretion on sentencing. How do you change minds on that?
Robert, we're not going to wait until January to do this. We've already had conversations with Senator Zirkin in the Senate, the
I saw him
chairman.
yesterday.
And I've had conversations with my colleagues. The Baltimore City delegation, of which, as you know, I'm chairman, is unanimous with regard to this. And we are going to have these conversations long before session starts. Actually, we're having them now, so.
Chairman Valerio on board?
I can't answer that one, no. I don't know.
We'll work with
Well, I just want to say this, because legislators from around the state, if what's happening in Baltimore was happening in their counties, they would be on board with what we're trying to do, and to really let you know, a lot of times, people who are committing some of these murders in the city are living in the surrounding counties.
Well, let me also say that I also have had a conversation with some of our surrounding jurisdictions and they are supportive of us focusing in on legislation for
County
Baltimore
execs?
City. Yes.
Okay.
And so, yeah, county execs, not your legislators, I leave that to you all.
Right,
Okay.
county
Yeah.
exec.
I talk to the county execs. Everybody wants Baltimore to be safer, and they're willing to be supportive as well. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to address the General Assembly along with my colleagues from surrounding jurisdictions.
Have you spoken with judiciaries?
I've spoken, no. But let me say that yesterday, was it 2 days ago? Wednesday at we have what we call the Baltimore City Coordinating Council on Criminal Justice. I did make mention of the fact that we need more responsiveness by our judges on this, and that Baltimore City, in fact, I laid out the problem specifically in Baltimore City as it relates to illegal guns. And what I did say to them is that we would love to have a conversation, but this is something that just can't wait at this point.
Do you think that the 1-year sentence mandatory is going to deter anyone from doing this? Because I assume if you're going after the hardest criminals, they'd probably stop at a 1-year sentence. So what's...
It'll keep them off the streets for 1 year.
That's right.
That will deter them from committing additional crimes.
While we're working on the additional legislation, we can do this now. Yeah, we're doing this now because we can do this now. And so we're doing what we can do now while we also prepare for January where we can do more. Let me just say, if you look at those cities that I talked to you about, the ones where crime is dropping, they all are felonies. Having an illegal gun in New York City is a felony. In D.C., a felony. Yes, and in Los Angeles, a felony.
So it's basically like a cooling off period then? I mean, what if is 1 year sufficient enough to maybe, like?
January is the legislative session where we go for a
It doesn't
5
have to
years.
be a year, not as far as-
Well, not in January. Not in January.
Can we ask Don Frank a question?
Surely.
Please. Don, the Greater Baltimore Committee wrote a letter to the city council. Actually, it's written 2 letters. One was to get the council to reject the minimum wage hike. And the second was to discourage the council from making any adjustments to the Baltimore Police budget.
Right.
I'm wondering if the Greater Baltimore Committee has, in the business community, has gotten together at all, sat down and tried to figure out a really meaningful way for the business community to reach out to young people. I understand how youth works, I understand that, but there are a lot of young people that are not engaged in that program or any other type of employment and education.
Yeah, the GBC's got a number of various committees, including an education and workforce committee that works on some of those areas, not only with strengthening educational opportunities, but also workforce development. We're also dealing and funding a program for people who are already currently employed in the STEM fields to help them move through career pathways. We're doing that along with the Associated Black Charities. We're also doing some work with the Coalition for a Second Chance, dealing with returning citizens and what we can do to assist them. We've been very active for many years. I chaired the Hire One Youth Program and was a member of the steering committee this year for the mayors on how youth work. So we're certainly looking at that area along with public safety, along with and transportation, many other issues.
And let me add too, Jane, I think I said this earlier, next time we have a press conference, we're going to bring those children who are working in the private sector, because you raised that question, because we have 8,300 young people working across the city more than ever before. Much of that money was raised privately, because when I spoke to the GBC, what I said to them was, I don't just want the young people working in city agencies. I don't want them just cleaning up parks. I need them working in your companies and corporations so they can dream beyond what they see every day, so they can get that experience. So we have to bring some of those young people that are working in the private sector. I promised Jane that I would do that, so we got to do that. But let me just say, on July 15th, because you talk about what are our children engaged in. You know, I just left a youth program this morning over at Dukeland. On July 15th, we're propping up as many youth programs that we have throughout the city, because there are young people, as you just pointed out, that aren't engaged. There are enough programs in the city to engage all of our young people. So if you know somebody who's not engaged or somebody who needs a program to be engaged in, at the War Memorial Plaza on July 15th, we're propping up those programs, and so we want to make sure that we engage all of our young people. I've also said to our school CEO, and I think you've heard me say this before, we know how many children graduated this year. We know where they're going. We know the ones that are going to college. We know the ones now, the 8,300 that are working. But where are those children that we don't know? What are they doing? And so our attempt is to try to engage and measure where our children are every single day. We've implemented the Do You Know Where Your Children Are at 11 p.m., but more importantly, we want them either working, engaged in a youth program, or somebody's mentoring them. The program up at Dukeland, it's a reading program, it's a youth activity program. Up there this morning, probably about 200 or 300 young people engaged in that program.
Your coalition here is rather broad across, you know, the legislative arms of government. But notably not up there is Judge Peters or Marilyn Mosby or representatives from either the judiciary or the state's attorney's office.
Well, I can tell you that we spoke to the state's attorney's office, and they are supportive of the legislation. She had something else that was on her agenda, but she also asked me to take a very careful look at a particular section of this legislation, but she is supportive.
So one of my questions is, this bill is essentially forcing the hand of people in the judiciary and prosecutors. Many of the convictions for gun offenses in the city are based on plea agreements that the state's attorney's office has reached with individuals. Have you had a conversation with the state's attorney, since she doesn't have a representative here?
Yeah, I did.
Have you talked about whether and how this change may impact her ability to strike plea deals with individuals who have been charged with gun crimes, and whether that's part of the conversation at all?
I really don't think that we should be striking no deals with people who are murdered, who are carrying guns in the street of Baltimore with intention of harming people. I mean, this is another tool in the toolbox for them to use for these type of folk who are wreaking havoc on the citizens of Baltimore. I mean, we can't make excuses. We have to have solutions that can address what's going on in the city of Baltimore, and this is just one tool to address that.
Well, let me also address your question. I've had conversations with the state's attorney. She is a part of our whole effort to reduce violence in our city. And she's advised us on several levels. We're not trying to tie the state's attorney's hand. As I've said before, the issue is not us prosecuting the criminals, it's us putting them in jail. And then keeping the court system from suspending sentences, creating the situations, as already have been mentioned by the police commissioner. We're doing what we can do. And this is not us against them. This is about Baltimore City.
I understand, and to the council president's point, I understand that sometimes you don't want to strike a deal with an individual, but if the state's attorney has no choice but to tell these individuals, you will go to jail for a year, I wonder if that could have another outcome, which is that some of these individuals will not agree to a deal, and they will instead decide to go to trial and may not get convicted. Obviously, there are issues with juries in the city when it comes to
They're gonna do their year.
All right, everybody wants to answer.
Yeah, I do.
Like I said, I'm not in this crime fight by myself.
So, Kevin, very thoughtful question, and as I understand your question, police officers make arrests based on probable cause. Prosecutors obtain convictions based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If I'm a gun offender and I'm charged with illegally possessing a firearm, what I know now in Baltimore is that it's 60% likely that nothing's going to happen to me. Nothing. Suspended sentence, even upon a guilty finding. So if in fact this requires an even stronger partnership between police officers and prosecutors to make sure that we have an ironclad case going forward, we're going to do that hard work. And the state's attorney, in fact, established a gun violence enforcement division last year, and we embed 6 detectives into that gun violence enforcement division to prepare these gun cases for court. But like the council president said, if a defendant doesn't want to take a deal of a year in jail, then we're prepared to take a strong case to trial.
Can I just add what the commissioner had to say? And look, I'm a defense attorney.
Okay, can we get back for a second?
Okay, let's,
I'm sorry.
who wants to hear from?
Jane? Yes, Jane.
Oh, I feel like I'm shuffling.
Yes, ma'am.
But
You're the boss.
obviously, we have pending in the federal court a very serious case of alleged police corruption, which involves a gun task force, which was one of 3 that operates within the police department or operating within the police department. Can you assure the public that as you now ask the Baltimore City Council to impose a local law that toughens the penalty for illegal gun possession, that your effort in the police department has integrity?
So Jane, I anticipated that question. I anticipated it would potentially come from you. The 605 cases that we're talking about since January 1st of 2016 are convictions. There were a number of cases that have since been dismissed based on the federal indictments of those 7 police officers. So those aren't part of the 605 convictions. As you know as well, Jane, I completely dismantled that unit once that corruption scandal that we participated, the BPD participated in, along with the FBI, making those arrests. In fact, we made those arrests at our Internal Affairs Division. We put handcuffs on those cops. So what I'll ensure Baltimoreans is that integrity is of the utmost importance to the trust necessary for public safety. So I can assure you that and assure Baltimoreans that that remains at the top of our to-do list. We have to police with integrity because we can't get to a better place without it.
I have a question for the Mayor Pugh. In a perfect scenario, would this local ordinance, could it be enacted before January?
Oh, yeah, the local ordinance, well, that's the beauty of this. The local ordinance can, the president of the city council will shepherd this legislation, and he's working with his city council members to gain the support. Yes, we could do this. Mr. President, you want to speak to that?
Yes, this ordinance is going into the Judiciary Committee, where we're going to ask for a speedy hearing so that we can get this bill passed and on the books in Baltimore City, so that if you carry a legal gun in any public places, the parks, the libraries, anywhere that's public, they will get a year. non-negotiable, 1 year.
Jack, what's the soonest this could go on the books?
Well, our council process is, the chair have to announce a hearing. After the hearing, it goes to second reader. It's on second reader, on the council's agenda, then the third reader. Then we pass it, and the mayor's going to sign it immediately, because we're going to wait for her. We're going to bring it down, and she's going to sign it, and it becomes law. And this is not, to lock everybody up, because those who want help, that's out there committing the crimes, carrying the guns, we're going to try to have these apprenticeship programs where there's a real job at the end, because that's some of the problems. There's not a real job at the end. So working with Don Fry and some of the businesses who claim that they have these jobs but don't have the skill set to fill them, we're going to ask for their prerequisite, their criteria that they're using to train these people, so that those jobs are there at the end of the training to get these folk into some meaningful jobs where they can take care of their families. It's not about just locking people up. There's going to be other alternatives for them as well.
Mayor, you able to move this before Labor Day?
Yes.
Mayor, can you speak to what provisions of the bill Madam Mosby expressed concerns about?
No, I didn't have a lengthy conversation. What she said to me was she was supportive. She has to work with the judges, and we understand that. But no, we didn't go into any detail. She just said that she would be supportive of the legislation, but she had some concerns.
Mayor, do you anticipate any pushback from the judiciary?
This is up to the city council.
Oh, I understand that, but
I mean, let's go spade to spade, right?
We'll push back what we get from them if it's the law in the city of Baltimore. They have to abide by the law as it is written. That's what the judges say.
Mayor, you mentioned New York, and I think there are cities that have tougher penalties within their jurisdiction.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes, there are.
And it has held up judicial review.
Yes. Yitzi wanted to say something, and I think. Sure. Oh, you changed. Switch that.
So the two things to your point, Kevin, about whether or not this is tying the hands of the judges. I mean, this is a piece of legislation that's data-driven, which is how essentially all legislation should be put forward. And so, and tying that into to Jane, your point, where you're afraid that there could be opportunities where people who shouldn't be behind bars are going behind bars. I think this legislation actually is helpful in that. Instead of cutting plea deals nonstop, which obviously has not been working, it would make it an all-or-nothing situation where you have to go through the case, you have to get all the facts out on the table, instead of people who may be intimidated by the process saying, I'm just going to take a deal just to get it over with. And so those who are carrying illegal firearms in Baltimore City, they're either going to jail for a year or they're not going to jail at all, and let the system play it out. Whereas if we continue down this road, we're just going to continue losing young folk in the city who are just running around with guns. And so I think this piece of legislation nails it exactly how we need to address the situation.
So let me just say thank you, everybody. We've got another meeting that we have to go to. Thank you.
Thank you.